Hello, and welcome to Worship with Newcastle Unitarians. My name is Paul Walker, and I'm here with my family, Christine,
Hello.
Wilf,
Hi.
Ollie,
Hello.
and Poppy.
Hi.
We're members of Stockton Unitarian Church. Well, I say we're members. We've been worshipping there for about 2 years, and we were about to take the plunge and become members. And the Sunday that it was going to happen, lockdown happened on the Friday before, so that service never happened. So I'm not sure we are actually members, but I'm sure we'll get away with it. In the past, I was a minister in the Church of England, and so on occasion I've already been asked to lead worship at Stockton, and I was honoured to find that you at Newcastle had asked me to lead your worship, although I'm doing it from Stockton, and then hopefully one day we'll meet face to face, maybe even get within 2 meters of each other. So to begin our worship, let's, as always, light our chalice. And as we light this chalice, let's just think about the corners of our world where there is darkness. On the streets where people are reminding us that Black Lives Matter. On the wards where people are still suffering and dying from COVID. In people's homes where they long to be with their loved ones. So much darkness in our world, so much need of light. Now we're going to hear a story. So I'm going to hand over to Poppy, who will open it.
The Two Frogs, a Japanese folktale. Once upon a time in the country of Japan, there lived two frogs, one of whom made his home in a ditch near the town of Osaka on the seacoast, while the other dwelt in a little stream which ran through the city of Kyoto. At such a great distance apart, they had never even heard of each other, but funnily enough the idea came into both of their heads at once and at once they should like to see a little of the world. And the frog who lived at Kyoto wanted to visit Osaka, and the frog who lived at Osaka wished to go to Kyoto, where the great Mikado had his palace. So one fine morning in the spring, they both set out along the road that led from Kyoto to Osaka, one from one end and the other from the other. The journey was more tiring than they expected, but they did not know much about travelling, and halfway between the two towns there arose a mountain which had to be climbed. It took them a long time and a great many hops to reach the top, but they were at last, and what was the surprise of each to see another frog before him.
They looked at each other for a moment without speaking, and then fell into conversation, explaining the cause of their meeting so far from their homes. It was delightful to find that they both felt the same wish to learn a little more of their native country, and as there was no sort of hurry, they stretched themselves out in a cool, damp place and agreed that they would have a good rest before they parted to go their ways. "What a pity we are not bigger," said the Osaka frog, "for then we could see both towns from here and tell if it is worth our while going on." "Oh, that is easily managed," returned the Kyoto frog. "We have only got to stand up on our hind legs and hold on to each other, and then we can each look at the town he is travelling to."
This idea pleased the Osaka frog so much that he at once jumped on and put his front paws on the shoulder of his friend, who had risen also. There they both stood, stretching themselves as high as they could and holding each other tightly so that they might not fall down. The Kyoto frog turned his nose towards Osaka, and the Osaka frog turned his nose towards Kyoto. But the foolish things forgot that when they stood up, their great eyes lay in the back of their heads, and that though their noses might point to the places which they wanted to go, their eyes beheld the places from which they had come. "Dear me," cried the Osaka frog, "Kyoto is exactly like Osaka. It is certainly not worth such a long journey. I shall go home. If I had any idea that the Osaka was only a copy of Kyoto, I should never have travelled all this way," exclaimed the frog from Kyoto. And as he spoke, he took his hand off from his friend's shoulders, and they both fell down on the grass. Then they took a polite farewell of each other and set off for home again, and to the end of their lives believed that Ahsoka and Kyoto, which was different to look at as two towns can be, were as like as two peas.
Well, make us that as you wish. I want to take this opportunity now to do some reading. I decided to have a look at what our ancient religious texts, or some of them, might have to say about the conditions that we live in now. And that took me to, of all places, a book I don't think I've ever used in an act of worship before, and that's the book of Leviticus in the Bible. You might see why. Now, this concerns a contagious disease. The contagious disease we're talking about here is leprosy. But nevertheless, that was a disease which, whatever they meant by leprosy, I'm not sure it's the same thing as we understand as leprosy, which isn't particularly contagious. But it was a skin disease which was contagious. And so this is what they had to say about it. The person who has the leprous disease shall wear torn clothes, and let the hair of his head be dishevelled, and he shall cover his upper lip and cry out, unclean, unclean. He shall remain unclean as long as he has the disease. He is unclean. He shall live alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. That can seem a little bit callous, really, to me. And yet that was the rule. If you caught this particular contagious disease, get out. Live outside the camp. Live alone. And then, 2,000 years later, we find another passage, this time actually in something called the Hadith. Now, if you know what the Hadith is, in Islam there's the Quran, which is the word of God given to the Prophet Muhammad through Jibreel. But there's also a series of writings about the life of Muhammad himself and his teachings, and they're called the Hadith. So, in the Hadith in Sahih Bukhara, Aisha asked the Prophet Muhammad about pandemics. He replied, "It is a mercy for the believers if a person lives through a pandemic and fulfills 4 conditions, and then they will receive the reward similar to that of a martyr. They will enter heaven without any questioning." These conditions are: 1, they stay on their land; 2, they bear it patiently; 3, they anticipate reward from Allah; and 4, they have confidence that whatever happens is from Allah. What I find fascinating is that first condition: they stay on their land. So we get two reactions to contagious diseases. The first is leave, go and be on your own. And the second is you stay on your land. Presumably you don't go to anybody else's land. And that's how we find ourselves. Suddenly, these things that were all in the past, we suddenly find ourselves in the same place. And we long, I guess, most of us, for it to be different. I have 3 children who don't live with me, who I see, or 2 of them I see, but I long to hug them. I long to get close to people. I long to go to the pub. I've always had a bit of a problem with Moses. I know you're meant to like him, and there's the old Charlton Heston stuff and the 10 Commandments, which nobody can ever remember, by the way. Whenever anyone says to you, "I think you should live by the 10 Commandments," say, just name them. I've never met anyone who can actually name what they are. But there's the awkward bit about killing all the firstborn kids in Egypt and the genocide against the Midianites. And so whenever I look at, I've always kind of ignored things like the book of Leviticus. But then when I was reflecting on this pandemic, the passage we've heard, the bit about keeping the leper outside, this pandemic helped me to understand what that's about. Here was a nation living precariously. It's a small nation of people. On the one side, they have the massive empire of the Babylonians, the Persians. On the other side, there's the Egyptians at war with each other. Here's this tiny little nation in between. You get somebody with a serious contagious disease, and that gets passed around to others, and that could be the end of the nation. And so how do you deal with that? Well, you have to make sacrifices. And in the end, okay, it's callous, it's hurtful, but we have to send that person out for the sake of the greater good of the greater community. And then 2,000 years later, we're not maybe so precarious. Things are still precarious for Muhammad and his tribe, but not so. They're living in Saudi Arabia, but you stay on your land. You don't travel about. If a pandemic arrives, you stay where you are. You essentially self-isolate. And I guess millions have read those passages and thought to themselves, that was then, but we're better now. We've got medicine. We can solve these things. And then we find ourselves where we are. And here it is, a pandemic. And here we are. And yes, we think Moses was callous to send people out of the camp. But we find that people are being sent out of the camp in our society. Ambulances taking people from nursing homes who were coughing with a dry cough. They arrive, they weren't even tested. They were turned round, sent back to the nursing homes, and we know what happened next. Other people sent out of the camp are those who are black or minority ethnic, catching the disease far more than anybody else, but also being fined more than anybody else for breaking quarantine rules. And then we find some of them are actually being choked to death for 9 minutes with a knee on their throat, sent out of the camp. But for most of us, self-isolation does not mean starvation. It may mean no hugs, but it doesn't mean no conversation. It may mean no pub, but it doesn't mean no beer. It may mean no concerts, but it doesn't mean no music. Generations have suffered from pandemics throughout history. There have been quarantines and there have been isolation, as we've already seen. And I could think it's pretty certain that for those people with means in Europe and in North America, there has never been such an easy quarantine, such an easy isolation. But still we moan. A friend made a good point. Everybody is living as a lot of us would wish all of us to live, by simply getting what they need. And as a result, the economy is collapsing. We're not flying, so we have to find beauty where we are. We're not eating out, so we have to find flavors in what we cook. And lo and behold, we begin to realize that actually things aren't as bad here and things taste as good here. Maybe a good side of this self-isolation is we're beginning to realize that where we are is possibly okay. And I've noticed several things I'm not sure I'd ever noticed. How quick garlic grows. There are spiders in my garden that move incredibly quickly. If I look out of my window, in fact, as I look out now, there's a busy pair of blackbirds constantly scrabbling and searching for food. And today I noticed the male with a young one that had clearly just fledged. I've noticed the joy of the arrival of rain after weeks of dry weather. I've noticed my neighbours' habits. And bees hanging about outside upstairs windows. I didn't know they did that, but they seem to. Would we have noticed any of these without this self-isolation? I've also noticed myself. Of course, I'm always with myself. Wouldn't it be great to have a holiday from me? I mean, obviously from me. I guess you might like a holiday from me. But I've noticed things about myself that I'm not sure I knew so much. I've noticed how quickly I can get irritated, how slowly I take to finish a jigsaw puzzle, how much I prefer listening to music than watching the telly. This is a hard time. We may not be sitting in a bomb shelter, but civilian casualties in the last 3 months are greater than in any year during the Second World War, at least in Britain. But we have a choice. We have no choice about self-isolating, even though that's beginning to break down. But we have a choice. We can either make the most of this or we can moan. And I want to end by Christine reading a poem about noticing nature alone.
This was written towards May in 1847. It's by Christina Rossetti. Spring Quiet. Gone were but the winter, come were but the spring. I would go to a covert where the birds sing, where in the whitethorn singeth a thrush, and a robin sings in the holly bush. Full of fresh scents are the budding boughs, arching high over a cool greenhouse. Full of sweet scents and whispering air, which saith softly, we spread no snare. Here dwell in safety, here dwell alone, with a clear stream and a mossy stone. Here the sun shineth most shadily, here is heard an echo of the far sea, though far off it be.
And so I guess at the end of this is time to turn our minds and our thoughts to those outside of ourselves, to those in special need. We think of the Black Lives Matter movement, the family of George Floyd, and all who have been so grievously affected by the knowledge of what happened to him. We think of those still reeling from the after effects of the COVID-19 crisis, and those fearing a second wave. We think of frontline staff in our care homes, on our buses, in our shops, and in our hospitals. And we think of those who we love but can't get near to. And we take a few moments silence to collect our thoughts and to send them to whatever source gives us meaning. And join these together in the words that Jesus taught. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
May you have walls for the wind and a roof for the rain, and drinks beside the fire, laughter to cheer you, and those you love near you, and all that your heart may desire.